Hello and welcome back. This is the Clay Golem. This is not quite Foundry VTT, and in this video we're going to look at hosting because I've self-host and I have done all my time using Foundry, but there are some disadvantages to that. So those main ones, if you self-host, you'll already know some of these, of course. You're reliant on your internet speed for people connecting to your game. What that means is if you have slow up download times, then actually it can be slow loading certain scenes and things. For a lot of the time that is not a problem, and you can in Foundry preload scenes, so it's doing that in the background before you're ready to switch and things like that. So there are ways around it, but the bigger your scenes, the higher quality of your graphics and all of those things, the slower that goes, and that can be a little bit of a problem. The other thing is, of course, you have to have Foundry running in order for your players to be able to access anything. And you may not, you may very deliberately not, but you may want them to be able to access your players, to be able to access the game offline to do things like leveling their characters, checking out spell lists, whatever it might be. They might be using the journals to make notes and things like that. So I've decided to make the switch. And there's obviously quite a few different options. There are people who have set up their own servers on Raspberry Pis and done it that way. The issue with that is that doesn't get around any slow internet connections because you're still hosting at home, or just using another machine to actually do the hosting and then they connect to that within their own house. But of course, there's lots of other things you can do that are web-based, and most people who decide they want to host and not self-host, they would use a web solution. I've chosen to go with Molten hosting for this. There is Foundry hosting, there's Forge, which a lot of people have heard of, lots of different choices. And it really is horses for courses. You decide what's going to work for you. I've chosen Molten because one of the things that attracted me was some of the things I was reading about it was it's the closest look and feel wise to self-hosting that you kind of get. And I thought, you know what, I don't have to relearn a new interface and things like that. It sounds like it's really quite straightforward. So I went with that. So I'm going to walk you through in this video how to set up if you choose to go to Molten. This is not sponsored in any way, shape or form. I chose Molten because it looks like it serves my purposes. You can look at others. But if you do go with Molten, this is how you're going to set yourselves up. Now, I've already done this. So I've already got one on here. Bearing in mind that you pay for your level of access that you want, which is around how much space that you have available, how quick your connection speed and things is. But you can also add upgrades onto that if you want to. So it's on the right here, it's talking about these tiers. If you have particularly big games that are particularly hungry for information, you can actually upgrade like the RAM that is used on the server for you. So if you get some performance issues, you can do that. That doesn't affect storage space. So you pick your storage space connection speed option, and then you can upgrade the amount of RAM that is being used on the server side to run your games. Get what I mean? It'll make more sense, I'm sure, as we go through. So the very first thing you'll need to do is to create yourself an account. Okay, so you can just go to moltenhosting.com or just Google Molten Hosting, or go through the Foundry homepage because they've got links to it on their website. And it will bring you here once you enable you to create an account. So you create your account, easy peasy. But how do you set up your server for this? Because having an account is not the same as having a server. At the top here, we've got a server thing. Now notice that I've already got a server running, but I can create a new server. So that server running, or rather that server I've already created, is my transitioned over Curse of Strahd game that I'm running on version 12. I wanted a second server that's running Foundry version 13 because I'm doing a lot more stuff in that. I'm playing on version 12, I'm building in version 13. If you want to be able to have two different servers at the same time, you do need to pay for the elite tier, so it is a little bit more expensive. Most of you won't need to do that. I'm doing it because I have the dual thing going on, mostly for you guys, but whatever. So creating a new server, it's going to basically give us some really basic information here. I'm going to change to version 13 for this one, and then I can name my server whatever I like. So I'm going to call this Clay Golem version 13 so that I can distinguish it between my two different places. Where is it based? So where's the server based? Just pick the location that's closest to yourself, which for me happens to be Frankfurt. So I'm picking that. And what you'll see is straight away, because of my server name, my server will be accessible from claygolemv13.moltenhosting.com. I'm going to submit that. Now it is going to show on screen a few passwords and things like that it's going to generate for me that I'm going to blur out. Remember that, Mr. Editor, please do that. And here we go, that's setting it up. So it says its server creation takes 5 to 10 minutes, so sit tight. So while we're waiting for that, I might obviously, just chop out the video and come back when that's done. But we've got the name of our server, Clay Golem V13. It's currently creating, it's given me the region, and if you have a Discord, you can create a webhook for that. It's really easy. Create a webhook in Discord, chuck it in there, and what that means is that Molten, your server, so Clay Golem version 13, will post to Discord to let you know about the server going up and down and things like that. Now for me that's really useful. I kind of know when my players are actually looking at it and stuff like that. Right, I'll be back in a couple of minutes once this has finished doing its whizzy bit. Okay, we are back. It has finished doing its server setup and instantly taken me to this screen. So you can see again, we've got a few more details here, of course, server name at the top. It's currently running, so it's created it and automatically running. There's the region, and if we put a Discord webhook in there, that would be there. I am going to do that. I'm just not going to do it right now because, boring for you to watch. I could have done that while we were waiting for the server to create, couldn't I? Duh. So you can see we've got some controls. We can stop the server, we can create a backup, export our game data, we can restart Foundry, or we can delete this server. I'm hoping if I click that it's going to give me lots and lots of warnings and say don't do that. You can see that it shows you how much storage space you have used so far. Okay, so this is really important that you know how much storage space you've got. Now again, because I've got two servers, I've got the elite tier, so I do pay extra, and I've got quite a lot of storage. The storage starts relatively small, but you probably don't need more depending on your game. It's going to give me a URL. So this is actually, and if I right click and open in a new tab, this is actually my Foundry game. Now you can see it's asking for my license key. I'm not going to type that I'm not going to type that in on screen for you, but that is going to activate my Foundry license key. So I'm going to do that in a minute, but not right now. It does also give you this server startup URL. Now what happens is the server over a certain period of time, it does change. The server will go, nobody's using it, I'm going to shut down. It's just sensible, it saves resources and everything else. But if your players want to connect to it, and the server's not down, they can't because the server's not running. But you can give them this link, and what it does is basically gives the server a kick, tells it to wake up, it gets the server running again, and then they can log in. So this magic URL it's called, but server startup URL, they click that, it starts the server for them, then they can use the URL to actually log in. Brilliant. Under here where I have blurred, assuming me as an editor to have done my job properly, is quite a long, decent default administrator password. So when you try to log in to your server, you need to put your password in, of course. And at the bottom here is some useful links with the emails for setting up your various files and things, and for logging in and stuff. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Just scrolling down, it will automatically do backups for you. I think the default is once a week, I think, on the lowest tier. and it will tell you what your backups here. So it will automatically back up your game state where it is. So for me, the next thing I need to do to actually show you this working, of course, is to put in my Foundry license key. So I'll be back in a second as soon as I've got that typed in and hidden from you. So I've put in my Foundry key and just said, yep, submit that. And the next thing it gives you is the end user license agreement. So you can obviously read through this properly, because that's what we all do. Agree to those terms, no problem. And this is going to take me to here. Now it's going to ask for my administrator access, and I need my administrator password. It gave me, under this blurred bit down here, this one here, default administrator password. There's a little icon I can click to copy, and I can just paste that straight in over here. And you can see it's quite a long password, which is good. And I'm not going to save that. And that immediately is bringing me into my game world, just as if you had a brand new instance of Foundry on your machine. Now, I've got 2 servers, of course, but I've only got 1 Foundry key, which means I can't have both servers and games running at the same time. Fine, don't mind that. Do I want to allow sharing? I'm happy to do that, no problem. So look, we've got no game worlds, we've got no game systems, we've got no add-on modules, we've got nothing. It's completely clean install. So first of all, I'm going to install my game system. So for me, obviously, maybe not obviously, it's going to be Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, it's going to be 5th edition. Here it is. I'm going to click install, and that's going to do that in the background. And it's relatively quick because it's server based, so it's not relying on my home internet connection. There we go, we're done. I can just make sure that's the latest version for the version of Foundry I'm on. Okay, so version 13, so it's brought in the very latest D&D one, which is different from my version 12 version. Does that make sense? Now I can go through and just add on all of my modules if I want to, that I want to use for this. Now for my version 13 stuff, what we're using for the live stream and things, I'm not really using many modules, but you might be. So in my live game, I'm using tons of them. And it's like, oh no, I've got to put in all my modules again. And then I need to configure them all again and everything else like that. Well, I don't want to. Now I've got a game system, of course, I can create a new world, and that's going to work exactly as it does in the standard Foundry. Now, what is going to be important when you do that is if you want your players to use that link to connect in and that link to wake up, you are going to need a default world. So you might have 6 different worlds here. That link won't tell them which one to log into. So you will need to make sure you do a default world. And I'll come back and show you that a bit later. Because the next thing I want to do, rather than laborious recreating my world, I could dump all my stuff into a mod and then import my own mod and then bring that stuff in. Of course I can do that. And the same way I can add all these mods on and then configure them all separately. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to show you the file side of it that makes life easy. Back to here. Now you can see that it's got a file manager name. We've got a file manager password, which is super blurred for you. And we've got a file browser. I'm going to right click, and I'm using the file browser. There is also the WebDAV host, but I'm using the file browser. I'm just going to copy my username for it. Okay, so I'm going to paste in that username. There we go. And I also need to grab the file manager password. And you can change these. You don't need to use these horrible default things. But as soon as I click there, I'm logged in. This is now the back end of that Foundry setup for that server. So if you can see up the top here, it is Clay Golem V13 files. So it's not my version 12, this is my version 13. They're completely separate things. So I can not cheat, because they very cleverly developed this specifically to allow you to do this, but I can make my life easy. If I pull over my other window here, This is my Foundry VTT version 13 folder that I've been working on, and I have a data folder in here. And in here I've got all things like my config, and importantly in the data folder any mods that I've got. So I've got a few mods that we've played with in version 13 even if I'm not really using them, but I've got things like my worlds in here, my version 13 playground, and there's my Lost Mines of Phandelver. And of course I've got these really tiny, there we go, make that slightly easier for you to see. So why don't I cheat and just copy them? So if I go into my data folder, double click here, you can see that I've got assets, modules, systems and worlds. If I go into worlds, I haven't created one. But what I can do is I can drag over this folder from my other worlds folder, and that's going to upload. Now it shouldn't take too long, I hope. It's halfway done already. You know, 28 files, bottom right. There we go. It's installed. My game world is now installed in there, which is great. Now I can bring in my version 13 playground as well, and I am specifically going to do that for reasons that I'll show you in a minute. There we go. I've now got both of those worlds in. Now, if I want to see both of those worlds, I'm going to have to restart this, right? Okay, so we could do that from here, and I can just say restart Foundry. So that's going to restart the server. It should kick me out of here. I've lost connection to the server. It's tempting to re-establish. It has re-established, and in theory, it's not going to do it. I might need to shut it down and restart it because of the way I've done it. I didn't actually try it that way before. Let's close it. And then we'll reconnect again using that URL. There we go. I need that administrator password. You can change these passwords, of course, so that you know what they are. Pop that in. Not going to save that. There we go. And it's brought in my 2 game worlds straight away. Now, obviously, the bigger your game worlds are, the longer that will take to do. But it's a heck of a lot quicker than having to go through and, you know, decide... you know, build everything from scratch and all of that stuff. So I can click straight into Lost Mines. So again, this is from the live stream, and I can log in. Notice I've got no players or anything for this. And instantly I've hit a problem. Why have I hit a problem? Because I haven't bought in the assets. So it's got all of my screens and things. Sorry, all of my scenes and things, but it hasn't got any of my images. Why? Because my images and stuff are in a different folder. So if I go back to data and I go to modules, I popped all of mine into Phandelver, into this folder here called Phandelver. So that's easy. Modules, and into here I'm going to drag my Phandelver module. So this is going to bring in all of the assets associated with that module, including any settings that I had for that module. So if you've got an existing game and you're trying to bring it over, you don't want to reinstall the mods, you can drag over the whole folder, but it will also bring over the configurations in the same way it's brought over the configurations for the game world with all of its various scenes and stuff. This is going to bring over the same thing. Now this is a mod, so it's taking a little bit longer because it's got all of those images and stuff in it. So it's bottom right hand corner, it's saying it's 29 files left. This will vary greatly depending on the size of your campaign or your mod that you're bringing in. So some of them will come in really quickly because there's not a lot to them. Anything that's got lots of graphics and images will take an awful lot longer. A prime example is that if I bring in something like Patrol from Ripper, that's going to be really, really quick and easy mod to drag over. In fact, I might do that in a second after this, because there's not an awful lot of graphics and stuff. It's relatively small little mod. If I bring over JB2A, the Patron version, it's about 6 gigabytes. So that's going to take quite a lot longer. Now, when you're doing those really big mods, I'm not really using any settings in JB2A. What I'm using is all of the graphics and things, yeah, because essentially it's a library of those things. if I drag that over on my PC, it's then uploading from my computer to the server. So that's using my link, which is really quite slow. Something like JB2A, it's going to be quicker to install that new directly into the game, because then the server is pulling it from JB2A and the internet is talking to itself rather than using my home connection. So if you've got a slow connection, that is 100% a really sensible way to do it. Now I am, like I said, I'm going to do patrol. I'm going to drag patrol over, drop that, it's done. See how quick that was? Because it's such a small module, it hasn't got full of graphics and things like that. Fandelver, of course, has got in the packs, it's got all of the scene maps and everything else in it. All right, so we know that I'm going to have to refresh to bring all of this in. In fact, actually, I could probably just do a Control F5 because it's, I don't know, it should work, right? Yay, there we go. Because all it was only showing me blank because it couldn't find the map. Now I've put the maps in place, it can now find them in the correct area. There we go, here's everything we've done. Now note that I have got plenty of tokens that aren't showing. Why is that? Because my token art is coming from Monster Manual. I haven't got the Monster Manual installed. So again, I could drag that across if I wanted to and do it that way. But because that's a very standard module, actually I can just go into install because I own it, of course. It's just going to load these available packages, find the Monster Manual. So what I would, come on, there we go. Monster Manual 2024, install that. And you can see that's going in the background there. It's almost complete already. Just unpacking it. So like I say, some things it's easier just to install the module, especially if there's not an awful lot of settings and things like that. So you can see I've got all my mods here, and as always I can just click update and it will check to see if there's updates required and bring them in. Let's go back into that game world. Just having a sip of tea while I'm waiting for that to reload. Just migrating all of that stuff over. Go back in as my game master. And hopefully it's now picked up those images just like it did with the maps. There we go. I've got all of my images back. So all of my red brands and stuff have come in properly. I've got my goblins and things like that as well, which are pulled from the Monster Manual. Nice and easy, right? Okay, so a couple of things that you need to be aware of that I've already mentioned. I'm going to go back to setup. Is if you've got more than one game world, your players, when they use the link, it doesn't know which one to bring them into, which is my live game. So what we might want to do is we might want to right click and edit the world, and we can just check all of this stuff is correct. But what we need to do, and I've got to remember how to do it. If I go to these settings here, that's right. So settings at the top right for my configuration. This is where I can change that administrator password, so I don't need to keep doing the copy and paste for that hideous thing. Change it to something I actually know. Obviously not going to do that on screen. And I can change any of these other settings. Default world. This is the one where I need to say if the players use that link, which one of my game worlds is it going to drop them into? And I want it to be Lost Mines of Fandelver. I don't need to change anything else on here. That's the normal kind of Foundry settings. I'm going to save application, job done. So we've now completed the whole of that process. What I would suggest is if you are migrating an existing game like I have just done with Curse of Strahd, check everything works. Because there's no reason it will cause problems. But you might find that, especially if you're using lots of additional packs, whether it's Gambit's pre-made, Cauldron of Plentiful Resources and things, you might find that it's got the wrong version of a particular spell or item or something like that. So it's worth just going through and checking those kind of bits. But yeah, this is Foundry behaving like Foundry, exactly as you would if you were self-hosting, except we've got much faster connections. And this ability to be able to just update stuff directly from your home machine is really useful. It does make a huge difference. So that's Molten hosting. It's, oh look, you can see my storage has just jumped up. It's just jumped up to 1.2 gig because I've now added those extra bits on. So every module will obviously take up file space. So JB2A, for example, is huge. It will take up a lot of your file space. You might find that the default, if the cheapest ranking, the cheapest cost may not be enough if you've got a large campaign and you've got modules with lots of graphics like JB2A. So just be aware of that. I mean, you can look at it on your computer. You can go to your data folder, right click it, go to properties, and it will tell you how big your entire data folder is, including all of the mods and all of the things you've already got in there, and it'll give you a good idea. So you can go check the pricing, make sure it's going to work for you. But to be perfectly honest, the low tiers are really cheap for what they are and for what we get out of this hobby. You know, it's cheaper to, on the lowest tier, it's cheaper to host a game for a whole year than it is to buy the player's handbook. I think that's winning myself. Lovely. All right, so that's it. I just thought, I've just been through this process. Of course, these things can be really scary, going, oh, should I? So I thought, you know what? I'll show you how to do it. And it is not that hard. It really, really isn't that hard. And again, some of the things that I read prior to doing this, Molten hosting was particularly straightforward. Not that any of the others are particularly complicated. I'm not suggesting that. But it's really straightforward, really easy to do. I'm an idiot. I've managed to do it. You'll be fine, should you choose to do it. And like I say, this is not sponsored in any way. I'm not using Molten for any particular reason except just reading the blurbs. This one felt like it was going to fit for me because this looks exactly the same as I'm used to, as if I was just in a browser window anyway. So my players have got better connection speed, lovely jubbly, and it gets backed up automatically. So winning, right? Anyway, that's enough. I can stop rambling. Do the usual things. Leave a like. If you're not subscribed, please do so. It really does help out the channel. Of course it does. Leave a comment if you are hosting using some kind of hosting platform or self-hosting. Drop a comment. What are you using? Why are you using that one? Pros and cons, because other people who are thinking about hosting, really good idea to read the comments on a video like this, because people will tell you the things that they hate and love about different hosting options that can help guide you in making that particular decision. The other thing I do want to say is some time ago I set up a Patreon account as a way for, I know not everybody likes YouTube memberships, which is absolutely fine. I did set up a Patreon account and I didn't do anything with it, and some of you cheeky buggers have found it on the back end. Massive thanks to you people who have found it before I've even talked about it. But on that basis, I thought it's about time I probably did mention it. I will put a link in the description here to that Patreon. What do you get out of it? You get bugger all. But if you do want to support the channel and you want to join the Patreon, hopefully I will do something a bit more rewarding for you guys that choose to do that in the future. But if you want to support the channel, you can do it that way. That's really easy. There's also the coffee link in the description as well. If you've got this far in the video and you've listened to me rambling, scrounging up pennies from you, very, very much appreciated, of course. And I will see you guys in the next one, or what actually will be tomorrow evening for the live stream. Take care, and I will see you soon.